The rain was falling hard that night. The street was almost empty, just a few cars passing by, their headlights cutting through the water. A small store stood at the corner. Its sign flickered, half-lit inside. A young man named Yolan was pink. For a bottle of milk and some bread, he looked tired but calm. He didn't know this night was about to change everything. Outside, his younger sister Alyssa, who was 7 months pregnant, waited under a broken umbrella. She smiled when she saw Yolan coming out. He handed her the bag and opened his jacket to protect her from the cold. "Let's go," he said. "Doctor's appointment in the morning." Alyssa nodded. "Baby's kicking a lot tonight." Yolan smiled. Maybe he wants to meet his uncle. Early, they both laughed as they walked toward the bus stop. But then they heard sirens. 2 police cars pulled up fast. Tires screeched for officers jumped out. One of them, tall, pale, angry, pointed at Yolan. "That's him. Hands. Where I can see them." Yolan froze. "What?" "I didn't do anything," he said calmly, raising his hands slowly. Alyssa stepped in front of him. "He didn't do anything." "What's going on?" The officer pushed her back roughly. She almost slipped. "Step aside, ma'am. We have orders." A second officer grabbed Jalen's arm and pulled it behind his back. "You're under arrest." Jalen's face showed pure confusion. "For what? What did I do?" No answer. They slammed him against the car and cuffed his wrists. The rain made everything blurry. Alyssa screamed and begged. She clutched her belly and cried, "He's innocent." People nearby began recording on their phones, but the officers didn't stop. One officer leaned in close and whispered into Jalen's ear, "You'll be in front of Judge Harris tomorrow. Let's see if he still shows mercy." Then he shoved Yolan into the back seat. The door slammed shut. Alyssa stood in the rain, her tears mixing with the water on her face. She looked down at the bag in her hand, the bread and milk now soaked. A crowd began to form, asking questions, but Alyssa just whispered to herself, "Why would a judge care about Yolan? What is going on?" At the station, Yolan was taken to a cold, dark cell. No explanation, no lawyer, just silence. He sat on the hard bench, wet and shivering. His mind was racing. Judge Harris. Why did that name sound familiar? He had never been in trouble, never broken the law. He worked at a repair shop and cared for his sister. Their parents had died young, and Yolan had raised her like a brother and a father. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a criminal, so why was he here? And why did the officer look so satisfied? Back at home, Alyssa called every number she could. She finally reached a young lawyer named David who agreed to take the case. He promised to come to court in the morning, but even he sounded unsure. When he heard the name of the judge, Judge Harris, David asked on the phone, "That's surprising. Are you sure?" "Yes," Alyssa replied. "That's what the officer said." David was quiet for a moment, then he spoke in a serious voice. "Stay calm. I'll be there first thing in the morning. But if what I think is true, this is bigger than you know." The night passed slowly. Yolan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Alyssa's frightened face in the rain. He remembered the officer's whisper, and he remembered something else. Something from years ago. A name. A courtroom. A case that went very wrong. Morning came. The courtroom was already full. News reporters, lawyers, police officers, even strangers who had seen the video online. Alyssa's video had come to watch. The judge hadn't arrived. Yet David sat beside Yolan in the waiting area. "You sure you don't know why they arrested you?" David asked again. Yolan shook his head. "No idea, but something's wrong. I can feel it." Then the door opened. The bailiff announced, "All rise. Judge Harris is entering the courtroom." Everyone stood. The judge walked in, holding a file in his hand. He sat down, then slowly looked up. And when he saw Jalen's face, he froze. His hand dropped the file, and for a long moment, the entire courtroom went silent. Judge Harris had been on the bench for nearly 20 years. He had seen hundreds of faces, heard thousands of cases, but nothing prepared him for what he saw that morning. When he looked up and saw Jalen, his hand froze midair. The file he was holding slipped from his fingers and landed on the desk with a soft thud. The courtroom was still standing. No one spoke. It was like time had stopped. Yolan stared back at the judge, confused but calm. He didn't recognize him. He had never met him before, but Judge Harris. His eyes widened. His lips parted slightly, as if a secret had suddenly returned. From the dead, he leaned forward slowly, picked up the file, and opened it again, hands trembling. Nothing inside. No charge sheet. No arrest warrant. No official statement. Just a blank form. And a name. Yolan Carter. The courtroom was silent. Jalen's lawyer, David, looked at the file over the judge's shoulder and frowned. "Your Honor," David said, with respect, "there are no charges here. My client was arrested without explanation. We ask for immediate release." The judge didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and stared at Yolan again. Then he spoke, in a voice low and uncertain. "Bailiff, clear the room. Everyone now." Gasps filled the courtroom. "But Judge," the prosecutor began. "I said clear it," the judge shouted, louder now. Reluctantly, everyone started filing out. Reporters, police officers, even Alyssa, who cried out, "Please don't do anything to him." David quickly grabbed her hand. "He's not going to hurt him. Something else is happening." 5 minutes later, the courtroom was empty except for Yolande David, the judge, and a single bailiff. Judge Harris stood up and walked slowly down from the bench. He didn't look like a judge anymore. He looked scared. He sat at the defense table, across from Yalan, and for the first time, his voice cracked. "You don't know me, do you?" Yalan shook his head. "No, sir." The judge sighed and looked away. "I know your mother," David blinked. "Excuse me. Her name was Linda Carter. She was in my courtroom 17 years ago." Jalen's body tensed. "My mom died when I was 10, he said softly. "She was sick. She worked too much." Judge Harris nodded slowly. "Yes, after she was taken," David leaned in. "Taken." Judge Harris closed his eyes. "She was charged with theft, wrongfully. She came to my courtroom crying, begging for mercy, but I didn't listen. I believed the wrong person, and she lost her job, her home, her health." He looked at Yalan again, eyes full of shame. "I broke her, and now her son is standing in front of me, accused of nothing, but still in handcuffs." David couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So, this arrest, was it a setup?" Judge Harris nodded. "Someone inside the department wanted to teach me a lesson. They found your name. They knew what it would do to me, and now here we are." Yalan looked between the two men. He was still trying to understand. "You're saying I was arrested because of you?" Judge Harris couldn't answer. David stood. "This is a violation of every legal right. He was used like a tool. For what? Guilt? No," the judge whispered. "For revenge?" Just then, there was a knock on the courtroom door. The bailiff opened it slightly and whispered, "There's a woman asking to come in. She says, you know her." "Judge." Judge Harris looked up. "Let her in." The door opened, and a woman in a dark green coat walked in, calm, confident, cold. Her name was Detective Lana Monroe. She walked straight to the front of the courtroom. "Well," she said, "did he remember you?" Judge Harris stood. "What is this, Monroe? Why was this boy arrested?" She smiled faintly. "You once said you never make mistakes, that you judge fairly. I just wanted to show you what it feels like to be powerless, to have someone you care about dragged in and treated like nothing." The judge's face turned red. "You had him arrested for revenge." She shrugged. "A black boy with no record. Who cares? You didn't when it was his mother." Yalan stood now, trembling. "You did this. You don't even know me." Lana stepped closer to him. "I didn't need to know you. I just needed to break him." She pointed to the judge. "He ruined lives with that gavel. He destroyed families like yours. I just gave him a taste." David moved quickly in front of Yalan. "This is illegal," he said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure the whole world hears it." But Yalan spoke, voice calm but cold. "No, let them hear it from me." Outside, the courtroom had filled. Up again, people were watching through windows, phones ready. Judge Harris walked out first, face pale, but no longer hiding. Jalen followed. Reporters rushed forward, and then in front of all of them, the judge turned to the crowd and said, "There's something you all need to know, something about me, and something about what justice really means." The news spread like fire. A judge who paused court, a young man arrested without charges, a secret from 17 years ago, and a confession on the courtroom steps. Everyone was talking about it. Some called it justice, some called it corruption, but most people called it shocking. Behind every story, there is always someone watching, and behind this one, in a tall building across from the courthouse, stood a woman in a long gray coat. She was standing behind tinted glass, holding a file close to her chest. Her eyes didn't blink, her face didn't move, but her heart, it was heavy. Her name was Clara Banks. She used to be an investigative journalist, fearless, sharp, and always after the truth. Now, she worked in silence, away from the spotlight, but still pulling the strings behind powerful stories. She knew everything about Judge Harris. She knew everything about Yolan, and she knew that this moment was coming for years, because she had helped build it. Back in 2007, Clara had covered a small trial. A woman named Linda Carter, accused of stealing medical supplies for her sick son. She remembered the way Linda stood in court. No lawyer, no family, just pain and honesty. She remembered the judge who dismissed her tears as drama. That judge was Harris. Clara never forgot that trial, and she never forgot what happened to Linda afterward. Eviction, illness, and death. She had tried to publish the story, but her editor killed it. Too small, they said. Too poor to matter, they added. So Clara saved every note, every photo, every piece of truth, and waited. Now the moment had arrived. The son of the woman once ignored was now front and center, and Clara had made sure the world would see it. Inside her apartment, she sat at her desk and opened a folder. Inside it were two pictures, one of Linda Carter in court, and one of Yolan, standing in handcuffs, rain dripping from his hair. She placed them side by side, and next to them, a headline she never got to print. One judge, one decision, 2 generations broken. She picked up her phone and made a call back. At the courthouse, David Jalen's lawyer was standing beside the judge in the hallway. The media was still buzzing outside. David looked at Judge Harris. His eyes were tired. "You should recuse yourself," he said. "This case, it's too personal now." Judge Harris nodded slowly. "You're right. But before I step down, I need to say the truth. All of it." David hesitated. And then what? He asked. The judge looked away. Then I let the system do what it should have done long ago. Meanwhile, in a coffee shop nearby, Alyssa sat with her hands wrapped around a warm cup. Her belly was larger now. The baby had kicked all night. A woman approached her table quietly. It was Clara. Alyssa looked up. Do I know you? Clara sat down gently. No, but I knew your mother. Alyssa froze. You? What? Clara placed an old photo on the table. Linda Carter standing outside the courtroom, holding a folder, her face full of quiet sadness. Alyssa touched it slowly. She was brave, Clara whispered. I wrote her story, but no one wanted to hear it back then. Alyssa's eyes watered. They never believed her. Clara nodded. But they'll believe you and your brother. That evening, Clara returned home and opened her laptop. She wrote again the same story she once buried, only this time it had a new title. The trial that came back a mother once silenced. A son wrongly accused, a courtroom that finally listened. She attached the video of the judge's confession, the arrest footage, and the file with no name. She hit publish. By morning, the story was everywhere. National headlines, talk shows, social media. Everyone knew now. A man had been arrested with no charge. A judge had a guilty past. And a mother's voice was finally being heard. But not everyone was happy. Inside a dark office in the police department, Detective Lana Monroe slammed her hand on the desk. She dug it all up. She hissed, "That reporter." Another officer looked nervous. "Should we shut it down?" Lana narrowed her eyes. "No, let them talk. Because talking doesn't mean justice." She looked at the wall where a list of names was pinned, and at the very top, Yolan Carter. Outside, across the city, Yolan stood on a rooftop, looking over the city lights. Alyssa joined him. She handed him their mother's photo. "Been proud," Alyssa said. Jalen didn't speak. He just nodded, then whispered, "We're not done yet." Because even though the world was watching now, the real trial hadn't even started. The courtroom was quiet again, too. Quiet, not because it was empty, but because the air was heavy with tension. Everyone had seen the video now. Everyone had read the article written by Clara Banks. The judge's confession, the arrest without reason, the haunting connection to Linda Carter's case from 17 years ago. People whispered in the hallways. How could this happen again? Why did the judge hide it for so long? But no one had answers, because the one man who could explain, Judge Harris, hadn't spoken since his short speech outside the court. He sat alone in his office, staring at the same photo he had hidden in his drawer for years. A photo of Linda Carter, the mother he had wronged. She had stood in his courtroom on a rainy Thursday in 2007, holding a folder full of medical bills, begging him not to believe the store manager who claimed she had stolen vitamins. He didn't listen. He saw a black woman, tired and poor, and assumed the worst. Now, her son had stood in that same courtroom for nothing, and it felt like fate had dragged him back to that moment. The knock on the door was soft. "Come in," Harris said without looking up. David, the lawyer, entered with Yolan right behind him. "We need to talk," David said firmly. The judge nodded. "I know." Yolan stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. "You said you knew my mother. You said you made a mistake." Harris nodded slowly. "I did." Yolan looked straight into his eyes. "Then tell the court, not the hallway, not the press. Under oath." Harris looked surprised. "You want me to testify?" Jalen's voice didn't shake. "I want you to tell the truth, in front of everyone, just like you forced her to stand. 17 years ago, that afternoon, Judge Harris did something no judge had done in that courtroom before. He walked into court not to sit on the bench, but to sit in the witness chair. The courtroom was full. Alyssa sat in the front row, hands on her baby bump. Clara Banks stood quietly in the back, watching history being made. David led the questioning. The bailiff swore him in. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Judge Harris paused, then said softly, "I do." David stepped forward. "Your Honor, or rather, Mr. Harris, do you remember the case of Linda Carter?" "Yes," he answered. "Clearly what happened." Harris took a deep breath. "She was brought in for shoplifting. I believed the store's manager. I ignored her medical papers. I rushed the trial. I gave her 90 days in jail." David nodded, "And then, when she got out, she lost her job, her apartment, her health got worse. She died 2 years later." Jalen's eyes didn't leave him. "And what did you do about that?" David asked. "I tried to forget," Harris said honestly, "but I never could." The courtroom was dead silent. Some people had tears in their eyes. Some looked shocked, others angry. Then David asked, "And now you saw her son Carter standing before you, arrested without a reason, no charges, no case file. What did you feel?" Harris looked at Yolan, eyes full of regret. "I felt like the system I was part of came back to haunt me, and I was the one who created it." David stepped aside. The prosecutor stood next. "You're admitting you abused your power." Harris nodded. "I didn't stop the abuse," which is the same thing. When he stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't go back to his office. He walked straight to the exit. As he passed Yolan, he stopped, looked him in the eye, and said, "I failed your mother, and I failed you." But I will not let the system fail the next person. I'm resigning, and I'm testifying at every hearing that follows. Yolan didn't reply. He didn't need to, because the truth had finally been spoken. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. Judge resigns over racist past. Courtroom turns into confession room. Justice delayed, but not denied. The world was watching, but not everyone believed it would last. Inside a quiet office far away, Detective Lana Monroe watched the news and didn't flinch. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. They're cracking, but the real pressure hasn't started yet. The voice on the other end replied, "Then apply it. If this story keeps growing, we're all exposed." Lana hung up the call and smiled coldly. The game wasn't over, not yet. And Yalan, he walked out of court that day free, but not done. He stood in the same rain that had once taken him away, now falling on his shoulders like peace. Alyssa ran up to him and hugged him tightly. "You did it," she whispered. Jalen closed his eyes. "No, we've just started." The courtroom doors opened again, this time not for a judge, not for a lawyer, but for truth. Yalan had been released. The judge had resigned, and the world was still watching, but something still felt unfinished. No one had answered the biggest question yet. Why was Yolan arrested in the first place? The file was still empty, no evidence, no crime, just whispers and secrets. Now, the court had to begin a new hearing, this time not against Yolan, but to investigate the entire case. A new judge had taken over. Her name was Judge Kira Monroe, known for fairness, known for fearlessness. She wasn't here to protect power. She was here to protect truth. As she entered the courtroom, everyone stood in silence. David whispered to Yolan, "Now's our chance." The judge nodded and looked at the people seated before her. "This is not a trial," she said calmly. "This is a search for what was buried, a search for truth." And she hit the gavel. The first witness called was Officer Dale Harper, the man who arrested Yalan outside the store that rainy night. He walked up slowly, wearing his uniform, stood up for the questioning. "Officer Harper," he began, "why did you arrest Yolan Carter?" The officer shifted uncomfortably. "We received an anonymous tip." "What was the tip?" David asked. The officer hesitated. "We were told he was dangerous." David leaned in. "Told by who?" The officer looked at the judge. "I don't know. It came through internal channels." David's voice grew sharper. "Did you see Yolan commit any crime?" "No." "Did he resist arrest?" "No." "Did you find anything illegal on him?" "No." "So why did you put handcuffs on a man, drag him into a car, and lock him in a cell for 12 hours? The officer swallowed hard. "I was following orders." Gasps filled the courtroom. David turned to the judge. No further questions. The judge looked at the officer who gave the order. She asked softly. Officer Harper looked down. "Detective Monroe." And just like that, the courtroom changed. People murmured. Phones buzzed. Reporters scribbled faster. Detective Lana Monroe, the woman who watched it all from the shadows, was now at the center of it. She was called to the stand. She entered calmly, dressed in black. Her eyes met Jalen's for a brief second, and then looked away. David stood once again. "Detective Monroe, did you give the order to arrest Yolan Carter?" "Yes," she replied, without emotion. "Why?" "I believed he was a threat." "To who?" She paused. "To the system." David stepped back. "The system or to you?" Lana's face didn't change. "You wouldn't understand," she said. "People like him walk away free all the time. They slip through cracks. We stop that." David's voice grew stronger. "People like him? You mean black men?" "I mean people who don't play by the rules." David raised a paper. "This is a list of all the men you've had arrested in the past year without proper evidence. 17 names, 14 of them black, and all of them were let go later." Lana's mouth tightened. The judge leaned forward. "Detective Monroe, you do understand that what you're saying and what you did is illegal." Lana folded her arms. "Call it what you want. I call it keeping order." Silence fell. David turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I ask that Detective Monroe be removed from duty and investigated for abuse of power." The judge nodded slowly. "So, ordered," she said. Gasps again. Cameras flashing. Lana stood up, still calm. But as officers approached to escort her out, she looked at Yolan one last time. "You got lucky," she hissed. But Yolan didn't blink. "No," he said softly. "I finally got justice." After Monroe was removed, the courtroom settled. Then, the judge spoke. "There's one more person I would like to hear from." She looked at the front row. "Alyssa Carter, please take the stand." Alyssa stood up slowly. Her hands rested on her pregnant belly as she walked forward. The courtroom grew quiet again. She sat, took a deep breath, and looked at the room. "My brother has always protected me," she began. "When our parents died, he raised me. When I was scared, he held my hand. And on the night he was arrested, I saw fear in his eyes for the first time." Tears filled her voice. "But the worst part wasn't that he was taken. It was that he was taken because of how he looks. Like our mother. Like me. Like our baby who's coming soon." She looked at the judge. "This system hurt my mother. It tried to hurt my brother. I'm here so that it won't hurt my child." The judge listened in silence, then slowly stood. "I want to thank you, Miss Carter," she said. She turned to the room. What we've heard today is more than a story. It is a truth we don't often face, but today we did. She paused. And now we must make sure it never happens again. Yalan sat still, eyes closed. The truth had finally been spoken, not whispered, not hidden, but spoken. In the open, on the record, but far away. In a quiet hallway, someone watched from behind a glass window. Again, not Clara, not Lana. A new figure. Unknown, unseen, smiling. Because even though one battle was won, the war wasn't over. Outside the courtroom, the world was watching. News anchors talked about the case day and night. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #JusticeForJalen and #TruthInCourt. But inside Jalen's heart, something still felt missing. He had been released. Detective Monroe had been removed. The judge had confessed. Still, no one had answered the final piece. Why was he chosen? Who made the call? And what was in the shadows that everyone still feared? It was 2 days after Alyssa's testimony when Yalan received a strange call. "Hello," he said, unsure. Though the voice on the other side was older, shaky. "Is this Yalan?" "Carter." "Yes. Meet me behind the old courthouse. Tonight. Come alone. Bring no one." The call ended. No name, no reason, just a voice, full of something between fear and urgency. That night, Yalan didn't tell David or Alyssa. He went alone. The old courthouse was abandoned now, dark, with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. He waited in the shadows. After 15 minutes, a man appeared. Older, black, dressed like a janitor. His eyes moved fast, like he was always being watched. "You're her boy," he said. Linda Carter's son Yolan stepped back slightly. "Who are you?" "My name's Mr. Briggs. I worked at the police records office. Long time ago. What do you want?" The man pulled out a small object. A USB flash drive. "I kept something I wasn't supposed to, but I couldn't sleep. For years." Jalen's heart raced. "What's on it?" "The tape. From the night your mother was arrested. And something more. The real reason you were taken." He placed it in Jalen's hand. "Be careful, this is heavier than it looks." And just like that, Mr. Briggs vanished into the darkness. The next morning, David and Yolan sat together in a locked office. David plugged the USB into his laptop. The screen flickered. A video appeared. Date, October 12, 2007. Time, 2:15 p.m. A courtroom camera. Linda Carter, standing holding her folder, tears in her eyes. Judge Harris looked tired, distracted. The audio played clearly. "I didn't steal anything, Your Honor. My son is sick. I needed the vitamins." "That's enough, Miss Carter," Harris interrupted coldly. Then something shocking happened. A man walked over to the judge and whispered in his ear. That man was Detective Monroe's father, Captain Joseph Monroe. The camera caught just enough. "You need to shut this case. Make an example." Judge Harris nodded. A few minutes later, the sentence was announced. The video cut to black. Then another file loaded automatically. Date, 1 week before arrest. Time, 11:47 p.m. Location, Police Department Conference Room. Captain Joseph Monroe, again, speaking with Lana Monroe and 2 other officers. "The judge's past is about to surface," he said. "If it does, he'll flip." "So what do we do?" Lana asked. "We send a message. Use that Carter boy. He's perfect. Quiet, clean. No one will believe him. He's just like his mother," Lana added coldly. The room laughed. David froze. This is everything." He looked at Yalan. "This proves it wasn't just about racism. It was about covering up the past. Your family's pain became their shield." Yalan didn't speak. His fists were tight, but his eyes clear. That afternoon, David stood in court. The courtroom was full again. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor, we now have solid video evidence, proving a conspiracy by members of the police department, past and present, to frame Yalan Carter." He plugged in the USB. The videos played on the large screen. Gasps filled the room. Some people cried. Others stood in shock. Clara Banks sat in the back. She closed her eyes. 17 years. "For this moment," she whispered. The judge didn't wait long. "I am ordering an emergency investigation. Captain Joseph Monroe and Detective Lana Monroe will be charged with conspiracy, misconduct, and obstruction of justice." Then she turned to Yolan. "Mr. Carter, on behalf of this court, I am sorry. What was done to you and your mother was a disgrace. But today, the truth was louder." As reporters swarmed Yolan outside the building, he spoke clearly. "This video is not just my story. It's the story of every person who was judged without reason, who was silenced, who was punished for being born different. I forgive them, but I don't forget. And I promise I'll keep fighting for the ones who still haven't been heard." That night, Alyssa and Yalan sat together in their small apartment. She placed his hand on her stomach. The baby kicked. She smiled. Yolan smiled back. "For the first time in my life," he said softly, "I feel like we can raise this child in a better world, but somewhere far away." Inside a dark room with covered windows, another person watched the video online, a former officer, still angry, still hiding. He closed his laptop and whispered, "You think this is over, Carter? This was only the first round." The sun had just risen, but the courthouse was already surrounded. News vans, cameras, reporters, everyone was waiting for one thing. The verdict. Not for Yolan, he had already been freed. Not for Judge Harris, he had already stepped down and confessed. This verdict was for the people behind the curtain, for the ones who gave the orders, for the lies that ruined lives, for Detective Lana Monroe, and Captain Joseph Monroe, the father who started it all. Jalen stood quietly near the courthouse entrance. He wore a plain gray shirt and black jeans, no suit, no tie, just calm. Beside him stood David, his lawyer. On the other side, Alyssa, now in her 9th month. Jalen held her hand gently. She smiled and said softly, "No matter what they say today, you already won." He nodded, but deep inside, he was still afraid. Inside the courtroom, the crowd packed every seat. Even Clara Banks was there, her notepad open, her eyes watching everything. Then the doors opened. 2 officers walked in, and behind them, Detective Lana Monroe, her face cold and proud. Next came Captain Joseph Monroe, older now, slower, but still walking like he owned the room. They sat down at the defense table. The new judge, Kira Monroe, no relation, took her seat. She looked strong and tired at the same time. "This court will now announce its decision in the case of State versus Monroe and Monroe," she said. The silence was thick. A clerk stood up and read the charges. Conspiracy to frame an innocent citizen, tampering with justice, abuse of power, racially motivated misconduct. Yolan gripped the edge of his seat. The room didn't blink. The judge began to speak. "This court has reviewed the video evidence. It has heard the testimonies, and it has seen the truth. Captain Joseph Monroe, you used your position to control judges, silenced witnesses, and hurt people who had no power to fight back. Detective Lana Monroe, you followed in his path. You targeted an innocent man not because of anything he did, but because of who he was. You claimed it was keeping order, but what you were keeping was corruption." She paused. "And now, this court speaks for the voiceless." She turned to face them both directly. "Captain Joseph Monroe, you are found guilty on all counts. You are sentenced to 18 years in federal prison with no chance of early release." Double quotes, gasps. Joska didn't move. He stared straight ahead, like a statue. "Detective Lana Monroe, you are found guilty on all counts. You are sentenced to 12 years. In state prison." Lana finally reacted. She stood up, shouting, "I did what I had to do. He was nobody. His mother was nobody." 2 officers rushed to hold her down. Jalen stood slowly and looked her in the eye. "My mother had more courage than you'll ever understand," he said quietly. Lana spat on the floor. But it didn't matter. The world had seen the truth. As they were taken away, reporters stormed out to break the news. Breaking: Monroe's found guilty. Racist police legacy finally falls. Justice for Jalen verdict stuns the city. Outside, Yolan faced the crowd of cameras. "Today is not just about me," he began. "It's about every black man who was judged before he spoke. Every mother who cried for justice and was told to be quiet. Every person who was told you don't matter. Well, today, we did matter." A pause. "My mother may not be here to see this, but her voice, her courage, was never wasted, because today, she was heard." As he turned away from the mic, Alyssa suddenly stopped walking. She held her belly. "Jalone," she whispered, "I think it's time." Within an hour, Yolan sat in the hospital waiting room, pacing back and forth. The courtroom was behind him. The city was buzzing, but all that mattered now was one thing: a new life. David arrived, smiling. "You did it, man." Yolan looked at him, nervous. David placed a hand on his shoulder. "You gave this child something better than freedom. You gave them a future." Minutes later, the nurse came out. "Mr. Carter." Yolan stood. "It's a girl," the nurse smiled. "And your sister is doing just fine." Yolan felt something he hadn't felt in years, tears of joy. He walked into the room. Alyssa held the tiny baby, wrapped in soft white. Yolan bent down and kissed her head. "What's her name?" he asked. Alyssa smiled. "Linda, after the strongest woman we ever knew." Yolan sat beside them. The trial was over. The city had changed, but more than anything, he was finally free. A quiet wind moved through the streets of the city that once ignored its mistakes. But now, something felt different. There were new posters on street corners. "Justice for Linda Carter. One trial changed everything. Truth has a name. Yolan Carter." People didn't look away anymore. They looked up. They looked forward. 3 months had passed since the trial. Captain Monroe was behind bars. Lana Monroe was serving her sentence in silence. Judge Harris had started speaking at law schools, telling students how not to repeat his mistakes. But Yolan Carter, he had started something no one expected. It began with a single post on social media. A photo of his baby niece Linda, wrapped in a pink blanket. "She will grow up in a world where truth has a voice, where her name means strength, and where justice doesn't come too late." The post went viral. Millions of people read it, and slowly, people started writing their own stories. A young girl wrote, "My brother was arrested for something he didn't do. Jalen's story helped me fight for him." An old man shared, 50 years ago, I was thrown in jail just for walking through the wrong neighborhood. I thought no one cared. Until now." A mother posted, My son asked me, Mama, who is Linda Carter? I told him, she's the reason you know what justice means. The city mayor called Yolan one morning. Mr. Carter, he said, I want to name a community center after your mother. Yolan was quiet for a moment, then said softly, she would have liked that. The building opened 2 months later. The Linda Carter Justice Center. Inside, there were classrooms for young lawyers, workshops on civil rights, free legal aid for families in need. And on the main wall, in bold letters, justice delayed is not justice denied, but justice must arrive. Under it, a photo of Linda Carter, standing tall. Tired eyes, brave smile. Clara Banks was there on opening day. She walked slowly through the hallway, her old notebook in her hand. She stopped in front of Linda's photo and smiled. We finally published your story, Linda, she whispered, and the world listened. Outside the center, reporters gathered again, but this time, it wasn't about a scandal. It was about hope. Jalen stood at the podium, holding baby Linda in his arms. Alyssa stood beside him. David too. He looked out over the crowd and said, this isn't about me. This is about everyone who is told to stay quiet. Everyone who is told their pain didn't matter. Everyone who didn't get their mother back, or their brother, or their son. He paused and held up the child. This is Linda, and she will grow up in a world that remembers. People clapped. Some cried even. The camera crews were quiet because they knew this wasn't just another speech. It was a promise, a legacy. That night, Yolan stood alone in front of the courthouse where it all began. The rain fell gently, just like the day he was arrested, but this time, he wasn't afraid. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photo. His mother, standing outside the store, holding her folder. He kissed it softly. We did it, Mama. They finally heard you. In the sky above the city, lights from tall buildings blinked like stars, and down below, in a simple home, in a quiet crib, little Linda slept peacefully, not knowing yet that her name had already changed the world.